when it comes to fighting climate change. And you know, when you talk about climate change, it's all about food security, and of course, we secure the future of the generation. Mr. Speaker, we cannot talk about climate change without talking about food security. And when I talk about research, it's good for them to research and know why do we have drought in this nation in some areas. They should not only research in this country. Let them go back to even other countries. Even in China, Mr. Speaker. The worst drought was in China in 1964, Mr. Speaker. The worst ever witnessed. And that's why they eat almost everything, Mr. Speaker. Because at that particular time, there was no food. They could eat anything that they could come across. There's even a joke that says, the only thing that has 4 legs that the Chinese do not eat is a table, Mr. Speaker. So I would want them to do research and find out why China has never had drought again since 1964, Mr. Speaker. Is it the variety of food? Do we interest Kenyans to add more to their diet? I'm not saying that you should eat dogs and snakes and everything that is eaten over there, but is it a campaign that we should start? We get away from unga all the time and go maybe to cassava, go maybe to sorghum, or any other kind of food, Mr. Speaker. So, as I implore the Council, once we pass them, because we're going to do, they should come up with policies that will help this nation move forward in terms of fighting climate change. Mr. Speaker, I'm a chairman of the Roads and Transportation and Housing Committee. And we will be bringing some proposals, Mr. Speaker, that those who are given tenders to build our roads, those who are given tenders to build the affordable housing, they should have some segment whereby they will have to plant trees around that area, Mr. Speaker. Even if you're building a road that is 1 kilometer, you plant trees 1 kilometer this way and 1 kilometer that way, Mr. Speaker. Those are the proposals that we are going to present so that we can mitigate the issues of climate change, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, because of this Council, and more so because of the President, this country for the first time is going to host the Africa Climate Summit. That is in September this year. Mr. Speaker, I urge Kenyans, and especially the young people of this nation, take advantage now that we have a council, and now that we have a president who understands climate change in and out, that we come up with programs and ideas that are going to assist this nation to be in the global map as one of the nations that fight climate change and brings the mitigations that are required. Mr. Speaker, as I wind up, proposals are given for this Council or the nation to listen and understand and pick them from those who give proposals, Mr. Speaker. Once this Council is formed, we should think of devolving it or devolving its operations to the county levels, all the way to the ward levels, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, we should even think when you are charging land rates. If you have trees, you pay less than that person who is not planting trees. If you have a forest, maybe you should not even pay because you are contributing to the low carbon rate, Mr. Speaker. So I think this is something that now we need to start discussing, invite this Council once it is sworn in, and give them all these ideas. And of course, I believe they are equal to the task, and I believe that they're going to do what they're expected to do. With those few remarks, Mr. Speaker, I support.
Thank you, Senator. Senator Esther Anyeni.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I also want to support this motion on the adoption of the report on the Joint Committee on the National Assembly Departmental Committee on Environment, Forestry, and Mining, and the Senate Standing Committee on Land, Environment, and Natural Resources on the approval hearing for the nominees for appointment as members of the National Climate Change Council. To the nominees who made it to this committee, I want to congratulate them. And unfortunately, to the one who didn't make it, I hope they'll consider a member from one of those marginalized communities. Climate change, before I go to the climate change discussion, I would wish to congratulate the Kisii University students who visited us this afternoon. I'm a young person as they are, and I generally think we share similar aspirations. I also want to wish them the very best as they anticipate to join leadership, and that's political leadership. And as young parliamentarians, we'll be looking out to mentor some of these students from the various institutions so that they are able to transit to national politics. So moving on to the climate change discussion, in Kenya currently, the discussion is a welcomed move, and from the composition of this council, it is already a sign of goodwill from the president, and other members will be constituting that council. But I would like to challenge that this discussion trickles down to the bottom level that we largely campaigned on. And when I talk about to the people at the bottom bit of the pyramid, I'm talking about rural women, talking about children, school-going children. I'm also talking about young people. When talking about the females, that's the women, most of these women belong to self-help groups who majorly do table banking. So apart from the table banking, I would like to challenge our Honorable CS, who is also a woman, to ensure that as this goes down to the counties, these women will also be brought on board. Let us have women leaders as champions of this discussion so that we can also have local women participating, because the effects of climate change affect negatively and positively the women, children, and young people who constitute most of the Kenyan population. Secondly, I see that the council will also be looking a lot on research. We have university institutions, we have technical training institutes. I'm looking forward to this being largely involved. Like for research, we have very many young people who are coming with a lot of innovations, a lot of information in the different areas, who should be tapped by the respective county governments that are going to adopt this. And for the school-going children, I'm looking forward to this being incorporated in our national curriculum, so that children grow knowing that it's a responsibility to have a clean, secure environment that is safe for everyone. So that the discussion is not starting when you are way older, it's starting way from school. I think it's India that has that formula of fighting the effect of climate change. Children in school are given seedlings to even go back there with them to their homes and plant. So they are planting the seedlings in school, they're also planting the seedlings at home. And the effect is that parents are also able to embrace this. And so once all these people are on board, I'm sure then we will achieve the 15 billion goal of planting trees in Kenya. Finally, this is for the young people. Young people have very huge numbers which are able to influence, mobilize, and keep those at decision-making levels accountable of their actions. I would like to urge young people that we join these conversations so that we are keeping those who will be making some of these decisions on check. And apart from keeping these people on check, we should also be able to embrace the conversation that our president has begun of participating in the planting of trees, so that it's not a discussion in Nairobi, but a discussion in Nyamasaria, a discussion in Kisii, a discussion in every other part of Kenya, and thereby contributing to the general goal of fighting climate change and being in a safe and secure environment. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Thank you, Senator. Senator Tabitha Karanja.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, for giving me this opportunity to contribute to this motion. I rise to support this motion and the approval of the appointees of the National Climate Change Council. I want to congratulate His Excellency, the President, Dr. William Ruto, and the Kenya Kwanza for taking the climate change very seriously. You know, we thought climate change could not happen to a developed world. We only thought it happened to the developed world. But we've experienced it, we've seen it, and I'm happy that now we've appointed a committee that will take care of this climate change. And I don't think they have much time. It is immediately to come up with policies that will meet in the international standard to seriously take care of our environment. I come from Nakuru County, where we have 6 rivers, and the Nakuru County has no water. They have 6 rivers and they have no water. Nakuru County has a freshwater lake, that is Lake Naivasha, and around that Lake Naivasha, we have our flower farmers around there, that Lake Naivasha, and 75% of the flowers that are exported in this country come from Naivasha, Nakuru County. But that Lake Naivasha, as we speak and we pride as a freshwater lake, our farmers, the flower farmers, they throw the dirty water, the pesticides into this lake. So I think this council has come at the right time when everybody needs it, and the Nakuru County people need it as much as the other part of the country needs it, to ensure that we save our water, our lakes, our rivers. I know when Wangari Maathai got the Nobel Prize and she was fighting for our environment, we all thought she was, I remember some people calling her a mad woman. But if we followed her footsteps, I'm sure by now we could be talking of, we could be talking well that we've achieved something, especially on planting the trees that she was advocating for and saving our rivers. I thank you, Senator Onyonka, for reminding me about the Chotara. When Chotara was planting those trees, I think maybe I've just come from school, so we are talking of many years that he did that. So what am I trying to say? Is that if we now take it now and start planting the trees that we all need, I think we'll be talking of in the next 5 years, 10 years, we'll not be talking of the problems that we're having now. And we'll ensure that those policies that will come that meet international standard, we'll ensure that saves our lakes, like the way I'm talking of Lake Naivasha, the freshwater lake, where we are supposed to get the best fish. But now, even as we are talking of the best fish, we are talking of how sure are we of that water. So we should control those for our farmers, given those policies that we follow, to ensure that they follow them, to ensure that they protect our lake Naivasha, the freshwater lake Naivasha. And our rivers are taken care of so that they can be made, that they can benefit the people of Nakuru County to ensure that we get water across the county. And I support the motion and support the approval of those appointees so that they start doing their work, then join the other part of the world to fight the climate change. The other part of the world have done it there before, so they don't need to invent the wheel. They just need to take the policies that they've done and implement them here in our country. And I'm sure within a short while we'll start seeing the changes that we've all been waiting for. Thank you, Mr. Speaker, sir.
Thank you, Senator. Senator Alexander Mundingi.
Asante Bwana Spika, yangu ni kuunga mkono mjadala ya wale wamepata kazi ya mambo ya kupanda miti na mambo ya mazingira. Serikali iko na kibarua kikubwa sana kwa sababu miti tutapanda na itasaidia sisi, hata tutapata mvua, pia tutapata maji itakuwa inakaa ndio tuwe tukipata maji ya kunywa. Yangu ni kuomba serikali ya Kenya Kwanza kwa yale wamefanya. Tunajua wale watu wamechaguliwa ni watu ambaye wenye elimu ya juu na ni watu ambaye wanajua ile sinda tuko nayo katika Kenya, na wakifanya kazi mzuri kwa hii kipindi ya miaka 5, serikali ya Kenya Kwanza itapata nguvu hata ya kusema ile kazi imefanya. Kwa sababu hapo mbeleni kama serikali zile zingine ingekuwa inafanya kama serikali ya Kenya Kwanza inafanya, kama kufikiria mambo ya binadamu, sisi hatungekuwa vile tuko. Kwa sababu kama ile shule imetoka hapa ya Kitui County, wiki jana mimi nilikuwa huko tukienda kuangalia mambo ya ndengu iwe cash crop. Unakuta hiyo eneo ya jimbo hilo kama alitaangaliwa vizuri ama majibu zile zingine kama kwetu Embu, ile miti tutapanda haitaweza kukua vizuri na itakuwa tunafanya kazi ya bure, na tunatumia hela ya serikali na hatutakuwa tukipata mavuno mazuri. Kwangu ni kuomba serikali kwa sababu wale watu watatumia pesa nyingi, pia wafanyikazi wao, serikali pia iongee na wizara ya fedha iweze kupatia hiyo wizara pesa nyingi, ndio pia wizara ya maji na wizara zile zingine ambaye kama ya blue economy ndio tu wakipata pesa hela nyingi, ndio tuweze kupata mboho, tuweze kuwa na mabawa mengi, ndio jua ni kali, ndio hiyo miti iweze kukua vizuri. Kwa hiyo yangu ni kusupport hiyo mjadala na kuomba serikali iweze kuleta hela nyingi, ndio tuweze kupata hata ndamu nyingi ya kusaidia hiyo miti iweze kukaa vizuri. Kwa hiyo mimi naunga hiyo mjadala mkono na sina shinda na hiyo, na tunajua tutafaidika kwa kipindi hii kutoka sasa kuendelea mbele. Asante Bwana Speaker.
Asante sana. Senator Joe Newton.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, for giving me this opportunity to also say something regarding the appointment of these 3 Kenyans to the National Council on Climate Change, Mr. Speaker. Allow me to first laud our President, His Excellency William Samoei Ruto, for finding it fit to appoint or to make this council so that, Mr. Speaker, we can address this issue of climate change that affects every one of us. Let me also congratulate the nominees on the approval by the National Assembly. And I want to believe that they are going to do the job that they applied for and got. They're going to do it, they're going to give it their best. Because, Mr. Speaker, climate change, as I have said, affects each one of us, each and every one of us. Now, Mr. Speaker, most of those that have spoken before me have talked much about planting of trees, which is very important. But I think, even as I also join them in encouraging the planting of trees, Mr. Speaker, I think I would like to advise our fellow Kenyans that as they grow, as they plant trees, that they may also think of trees that have other benefits, Mr. Speaker, because we cannot just grow trees that can only give us timber. we have trees like macadamia trees, Mr. Speaker, that will help our environment, that will help our climate, Mr. Speaker, and that will also have some other beneficial impact, because we can be able to sell the produce that comes from these trees, Mr. Speaker. Trees like, I don't know what you call them, orange trees. Those trees that have other benefits, Mr. Speaker, I think I would like to encourage our people to grow them so that we can arrest the negative impact or negative climate change and as well benefit from these trees, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, as we think about climate change, there are also some tendencies and practices by some of our people that are making rivers dry. We know that most of our people rely on horticulture done around or near rivers, Mr. Speaker. But I think I would like to urge our people to maybe leave some space for the rivers so that the vegetation cover near a river, Mr. Speaker, may not be removed in the name of planting some other crops, Mr. Speaker, because this is what is leading to drying up of rivers, Mr. Speaker. So these waterbeds, it's very important that we maintain them, Mr. Speaker. Soil erosion is something that the late President Daniel Arap Moi dealt with at length, I think in the 80s, Mr. Speaker. And I think most of the things that were being done then have been forgotten, if not abandoned altogether. I think this is something that should be rejuvenated, that we should think about again. Those days, there was a lot of cutting terraces in the small farms out there, and there were agricultural officers coming to farms and seeing what was being done. That is something that we can go back to, because it would benefit, it would help arrest soil erosion as it used to then, Mr. Speaker. Benches in our farms, cutting them, is also something that we should go back to. And the supervision by these agricultural extension officers should be reintroduced, because I don't know whether they are still there, and the chair agriculture committee is here. I don't know whether these agricultural extension officers still serve, but they are rarely seen, Mr. Speaker. And I think that is something that we should go back to if we are going to prevent soil erosion that has an impact on climate change, Mr. Speaker. Avoiding pollution, as maybe has been mentioned by those that spoke before me, is also something that we should think of at length. That pollution, be it air pollution, be it water pollution, pollution of all kinds, Mr. Speaker, and I'm happy that again His Excellency the President has found it worth forming Nairobi River Commission. Not Nairobi River Commission, the Rivers Commission, Mr. Speaker. And I think we are heading to some very good direction led by His Excellency, Mr. Speaker. And so I think if we arrest pollution, if we plant trees, and mostly those that are beneficial, we arrest soil erosion, and all those other measures, Mr. Speaker, I think, and I believe that those appointees are going to, to get some of these recommendations by this House and the other House, Mr. Speaker. And I believe that we will enjoy a better climate in the coming days, Mr. Speaker. And so, Mr. Speaker, I stand to support the nomination of these particular 3 Kenyans and this particular motion, Mr. Speaker. Thank you Mr. Speaker, for that opportunity. I rest my case.
Honorable Senators, there's a communication from the Chair on visiting teachers from Stone Town Academy in Lamu County. Honorable Senators, I would like to acknowledge the presence in the public gallery this afternoon a visiting delegation of 38 teachers from Stone Town Academy in Lamu County. The delegation is in the Senate for a one-day study visit. Honorable Senators, in our usual tradition of receiving and welcoming visitors to Parliament, I extend a warm welcome to them and on behalf of the Senate and on my own behalf, wish them a fruitful visit. I thank you. Senator of Lamu.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I wish to take this opportunity to welcome the visiting delegation of teachers from Stone Town Academy. Mr. Speaker, Stone Town Academy is among the best performing private schools in Lamu County. And Mr. Speaker, I can confirm that in the last Kenya Certificate of Primary School Education, Stone Town actually did very well. And that's why, Mr. Speaker, they were given an opportunity by the employee to come and witness what, to come and do the benchmarking here in the Senate, and also visit other parts of the Republic of Kenya, so that actually, Mr. Speaker, they can go back with a well-versed knowledge so that they can be able to advance the knowledge that they will get from all parts of the Republic of Kenya to the people of Lamu. Mr. Speaker, I want to say that Lamu is a county that education has been left, has been behind for a long time. But now, Mr. Speaker, because I am here as the Senator of Lamu, I want to urge this House, Mr. Speaker, to make sure that we join hands so that we can uplift the standard of education in Lamu County. And that's why, Mr. Speaker, I want to thank the visiting delegation of teachers from Lamu. And I want to encourage other teachers from Lamu County to make some point of trying to emulate what the teachers of Stone Town Academy have done, because I believe it is so, by so doing, we will be able to get some knowledge maybe from other peoples like Senator of Kakamega here, who is also coming from a very advanced county of Kakamega. I believe if this visiting delegation of teachers can be able maybe to make an point of visiting Kakamega, they can also, Mr. Speaker, be able to learn more things from Kakamega and actually take it to Lamu people. Mr. Speaker, I wish to take this opportunity and to welcome them in Lamu County, and welcome here into the Senate, and tell them that no man is limited. Today I'm the Senator of Lamu. They can also decide maybe to change their education career and decide to come to Senate. They are welcome. And if I'm the Senator of Lamu, they can also be something else. Maybe they think that they can be in this Republic of Kenya. Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker, and I welcome them.
We resume the debate. Senator Boni Kalwale.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, for this chance. And Mr. Speaker, before I commence my contribution, allow me, Mr. Speaker, to also acknowledge the visiting team of teachers from Lamu. Mr. Speaker, this is indeed a very unique council. Unlike any other council, this council is going to be chaired by the President. And the Vice Chairman of this National Council on Climate Change will be the Vice President. And the Secretary to the Council will be the Principal Secretary. That is a start team, and I want to support this report. But as I support it, allow me, for purely personal reasons, Mr. Speaker, to register reservation. I've read through, and I don't see why Umra Omar was denied an opportunity to serve on this council. I know Umra Omar. She's one of the rare women, a young woman, who comes from the marginalized community of the remaining Arabic community in Lamu. And Mr. Speaker, this woman is a scholar. She has taught at the university in New York, in the United States of America. And Mr. Speaker, Umrah, I know her because I'm a doctor. She has actually launched a Safari link where she brings in doctors from the United States, and they come to Lamu and they attend to the poor. And Umrah, if there was no other reason why we would have given her a chance to serve us, Umrah should have been allowed because of the respect of the Boni Forest. The Boni Forest contributes on positive climate change. I want to appeal to colleagues, senators, and our younger brothers in National Assembly. When we are vetting, we should always think slightly beyond just the name you know. I know, I can see in this vetting report, Umrah was challenged when she was asked about carbon credit. And obviously, knowing Umrah who she is, she's very honest. She said it will be part of the learning curve, which is not a big deal. I dare say that even in this parliament, we might have a small percentage of people who are not too clear about what climate change, what carbon trading is. Because this is a new thing. Having registered my reservation, I want to support this and inform the country that, Mr. Speaker, this thing of negative climate change is so dangerous. You will have seen that in this year, Kenya has been slightly hotter. For the first time in Kakamega, where we normally enjoy temperatures of almost between 3 and 8 degrees, for the first time I saw the temperature rise to 34 degrees centigrade. This is the effect of climate change. If you don't address climate change, be prepared to have a hotter world. If you don't address climate change, be prepared for floods and storms. Mr. Speaker, be prepared to lose species of animals. It goes without saying that during the current drought, where we are forced to even feed our wildlife, where we are forced to even take water bowsers to the wildlife, a number of other species have been lost. Mr. Speaker, as a doctor, I can confirm that with climate change, you expose our people more to health risks. And this is why the country should stand behind this council. Mr. Speaker, the issue of afforestation is at the core of what we are talking about. I was pleased that the UNDP came to Kakamega and launched a perimeter fence, electric perimeter fence for 117 kilometers around Kakamega Forest. Kakamega Forest, which is being the last remaining tropical forest in Kenya, only to be found in the DRC. Mr. Speaker, I must laud the UNDP, I must laud the government of Japan, which was the lead nation in this afforestation, in these fencing projects in Kakamega. And Mr. Speaker, as I thank them, I want to appeal, as I mentioned in passing yesterday when I was commenting on a statement sought by the Senator of Vihiga, that the Minister for the Environment should also encourage and reward communities that live with these forests. We know that in excess of 2,000 youth will be employed as forest reserves. I would be happy if a small percentage of these were reserved for youth from those communities that have preserved forests. On mind, I have the youth who should be given affirmative action to be given those jobs because they know how to live with those forests as it is. They should give youth from Lamu, Boni Forest. Mr. Speaker, youth from Kakamega, Kakamega Forest. Youth from Vihiga, Kaimosi Forest. Mr. Speaker, youth from Nandi, the Nandi Forest. Youth from Bungoma, the Mount Elgon Forest. And youth from the Mau area, the Mau Forest. Mr. Speaker, speaking about the Mau, I remember when I was serving as the Assistant Minister for President Mwai Kibaki, and I was working in Arusha, there was a day when we got a breakthrough. The country had been under a lot of tension because of the Mau invasion by local communities. And we got a breakthrough, and the president announced that we would plant trees in the Mau. And many people feared to go because they were fearing violence from the youth. I'm proud that I drove from Arusha at 2 a.m. in the morning so as to be in Nairobi and onward to Mau, so as to lead the team of courageous Kenyans who refused to fear those youth. And we went and replanted the Mau. Having done this, I reflect on the issue of the conflict between those forests and the people living there. I know there are those people who believe in plantation forests. And there are those people who believe, Mr. Speaker, in the so-called Shamba system. I want to discourage them on both. Shamba system is dangerous because you allow people to go and plant food crops in the forest, and at the same time, they take care of seedlings. Usually what will happen, because Kenyans are Kenyans, and when you're poor, you have to devise survival tactics. They'll plant the seedlings and plant food. But during harvest, they destroy those seedlings so that they continue planting food crops in those shambas year in, year out. The issue of plantation forests, we should be against it. I have done my audit and realized the majority of the plantation forests in this country are because of the cypress trees and eucalyptus trees. Cypress trees and eucalyptus trees were never meant for Africa. They were never meant for Kenya, Mr. Speaker. They were imported onto our continent, and if you come from anywhere where you have seen a plantation forest of cypress, walk in there. It is such a harsh species of plant that the cypress does not allow anything, any other plant to grow underneath. So when it is done, when you bring it down, you find it has left the entire area bare. On the other hand, eucalyptus is so harsh that it takes all the water, and when you plant it, the other plants find it difficult to throw long enough roots to get that water. The third disadvantage of this plantation forest, Mr. Speaker, is that when you allow harvesting, because it's a plantation forest, then the people who harvest, they take advantage to now stray into the natural species. Let me give you the example of Kakamega. In Kakamega Forest, there was misadventure of allowing a small section of our forest to have cypress trees, which are usually up for harvest on a regular basis. When these people come to harvest, because they have now been allowed to enter into Kakamega Forest with their power source, they then stray into the natural forest and they bring down the age-old mutukuyu, which in English is called the elk teak. And it is a tree that grows for hundreds of years before it reaches the kind of heights we have. I want to invite colleagues, members of parliament, for a nature trail in Kakamega Forest. It's the kind of beauty you have never seen. I know not many of you have seen one single tree which is over 100 meters. Meaning, if you cut it, the cut side will be on one end of a football pitch, and the end of the treetop will be on the other end of the football pitch. It's beautiful. In fact, one of the memorable photos I have in my phone is one such a tree, which my father planted for me 25 years ago when I was setting up my home. He planted it. And today, that tree in my home, and colleagues, you're welcome for a plate of ugali and mrenda in my home. The tree now sits at 55 meters, towers in my home. I challenge you, if you have such a tree in your home, I surrender my salary for this month to you. It's beautiful. And this is what nature is. Mr. Speaker, having said that, I have walked the length and breadth of this Republic of Kenya. And without belittling any community, I want to tell you the story of my community. My community, I don't know who taught them. They believe in forests. An ordinary home is not a home unless there are trees in the homestead. But if you go to many parts of this country, homesteads are just bare. There are no trees there. In fact, any little remnants of trees that were there are brought down so that the home, I don't know, to be made clearer or what have you, have gone to this kind of homes. We must teach our people more about agroforestry, since we have a shortage of land and since we want to improve on our forest cover. Part of the reason why we have 9 months of rain per year in Kakamega, it is because of agroforestry. I know Samburu, you're thinking it's not doable, it's doable. So the trees then, they create a circle whereby they cause the rain to come and the rain will always be there, so drought is a foreign thing. You can imagine, in a year, we have 9 months of rain at the very minimum. Mr. Speaker, I want to end my contribution by remembering my former colleague in this house, Professor Wangari Maathai. Professor Wangari Maathai was a great woman. In fact, when she ran for president in 1997, my brother and colleague and friend, Michael Kijana Wamalwa, was also running for president. If it hadn't been for that contradiction, that a personal friend, a mentor, was running for president, I would have voted for Wangari Maathai. Wangari Maathai single-handedly fought Moi because Moi was busy hiving off sections of forest land. Mr. Speaker, I don't know whether you know, if you go to the Mau, I see some of Moi's children speak, and I say, you can't address me. Because you go to in the heart of the Mau, and Mau is beautiful. You find the father just hived off hundreds of acres and planted tea. If your point of order is about challenging me on that one, I can clearly, I can substantiate many times.
Honorable Speaker, the senator for Kakamega knows very well why I'm raising on a point of order. Is it in order for Senator of Kakamega to discuss the late president, who cannot be summoned to this house to defend himself, Mr. Speaker?
Senator from Kakamega, Dr. Boni Halwale, you're out of order. Just conclude on your submission on it.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. If you are to allow me, I could vary the contribution so that it sits pretty with my younger brother and senator for Washnigishu. But because we want to keep track, you've had me. I don't know whether it is the DNA in him or whether it is the correctness or wrongness of what I've said that is guiding him. Mr. Speaker, I was bringing that example because in the fullness of time, if we really believe in this republic, we will have one day in this country have to discuss about historical injustices, which include, Mr. Speaker, unjustified wealth. Unjustified wealth, Mr. Speaker. And I'm not going to mention any name. May all those people in this country who use their high office in this country to unjustifiably enrich themselves and their families know that one day that conversation will take place. There is no way, Okio Mtata, you can justify how one family can have land ownership which is equivalent to the entire Nyanza and Western province put together. Not just that, but prime land. Mr. Speaker, this is the unjustifiable wealth that we are talking about, and we have nothing against anybody. I believe in ownership of property, in fact, a lot of property, so long as, Mr. Speaker, you sweat for it. I have been following your history long before you came here, Mr. Speaker, and I see how hard you have worked your legal practice. The little money you have that brought you here, Mr. Speaker, I know you made it, you sweated it, you spoke English in the court of magistrates, you spoke in the High Court, in the Court of Appeal. You have even addressed the Supreme Court, up to and including on presidential petitions. That is the prototype of a leader that we want to teach our children. A prototype of a leader like the bullfighter who brought himself to this parliament using the proceeds of my medical practice. Mr. Speaker, we want our children to know that there is distance in politics so that they don't think for you to fund your things, you have to plunder public resources. With those many remarks, Mr. Speaker, I thank you and apologize to the family of Moi if they fell by mentioning the land they had. I've made a mistake. I was making it as an observation on a mega injustice to the water tower of the Mau.
Thank you very much, Honorable Senator Boni Halwale. From the desk here, yours truly has represented a number of the Mau issues in court. The Honorable Okoiti Andrew Omtata from Busia, Senator.
Mr. Speaker, sir, thank you for this opportunity. I would personally, I'll be very brief, and I'll be looking at matters of enforcement of the law concerning matters climate and the environment. We have very many beautiful laws in this country, but hardly are they enforced. For example, if you look at the law governing riparian lands and rivers, you are not allowed to plow up to between a minimum of 6 to 30 meters from the center of a river. That law, when you were growing up, used to be enforced by agricultural extension officers, whom we hardly see anymore. And you'll find that today, people are plowing right onto the water of the river. People are buying pieces of land and settling right onto the river. If you come to wetlands, the law on wetlands is just sitting on paper. There's no enforcement. Our wetlands have been drained, and you know, Mr. Speaker, sir, wetlands were designed by God to work like a sponge, whereby when there's a lot of rain, they suck in the water, and then they release the water quietly and slowly into river or into the lake. But the wetlands have been destroyed by farming habits which are not scientifically sound. This has resulted into massive erosion, massive floods, and when during the dry season, you hardly have water in the rivers. The rivers just become a trickle. So the rivers have just become like a drainage system and not natural features which God placed on this planet to manage and control environmental issues. Mr. Speaker, sir, I would really urge that the organizations concerned for enforcement of these laws, we have got WARMA, we have got NEMA, and the like, if they took up their mandate and said across this country we are going to enforce these laws, and the land that is liberated we are going to reforest it or afforest it with the kind of species that are conducive to wetlands and river banks, we will increase the tree cover in this country. So one of the main problems with the environment for me is the failure by the institutions, the likes of NEMA and others, to enforce the law. Mr. Speaker, sir, I would also urge that we think of roadsides, the road reserves. We have very huge lands that are under road reserves. If the state decided to plant forests so that all our roads, our highways, become avenues, you can imagine driving from Mombasa on an avenue where that is ringed by forests on both sides. It would really be an enabling or an ennobling experience. The nebulous in this country would show. But where we are today, our roads are not considered worth being given some type of furniture or some type of tree cover that can add to the beauty, to the scenery, and also increase the tree cover in this country. Mr. Speaker, sir, we have got hills in this country, and some are owned by individuals. Hills which at times cannot make viable agricultural enterprise. And have now been invaded, and some of them have been stripped of their tree cover. Mr. Speaker, sir, it would be prudent for the government to come up with a plan to map our hills and also to do compulsory acquisition where people have got private ownership, property rights over it, and then do a plan to populate them with trees so that we can increase the tree cover in this country. Mr. Speaker, sir, I don't need to belabor the point. It has been stated that the meltdown in the environment is not sustainable. The solution is in tree cover and other practices. So let us look at that. And when we come to the question of wetlands, Mr. Speaker, sir, I would like to raise the issue of Yala Swamp. Mr. Speaker, sir, Yala Swamp straddles two counties, Busia and Siaya. It's about 16,000 hectares, or thereabouts. 11,000 of them are in Busia. It's about 17. 11,000 are in Busia, and only 6,000 are in Siaya. But when you look at the way that swamp has been dealt with, contracts are signed in Siaya with investors, and they come across and are messing up that swamp. Instead of engaging in a kind of farming activities that do not interfere with the swamp, they have done a lot of damage to that swamp, and it's high time that the government took action and intervened, and also helped us get a proper boundary between Busia and Siaya, So that if Siaya want to mess that side of the swamp, so be it, but let them not mess up the Busia side of the swamp. So the people in Bunyala have been disadvantaged by the decisions that are made in Siaya over Yala swamp. Also, the swamp has also been, a big part of it is now underwater because the rivers that flow into Lake Victoria have silted over. And the silting is because of the improper agricultural activities upstream, where swamps have been drained and then people are plowing up the river. And then you find at the end of the day, there's a lot of erosion, so the rivers have silted over. And when it rains, the water does not flow into the lake. So the water spreads on the land, and you get what has now become the famous Bunyala floods. The government needs to intervene because the county government does not have the wherewithal to do anything about it. It requires the national government to intervene and give us a scientific solution. If it is drenching the waterways, to open the waterways, it will help. And also the clogged waterways, because there are no roads that go to the islands and stuff, they use those rivers to access islands. You find people in those areas can hardly access their islands. And their lives are really, really difficult. So if the waterways would be opened, we would have a lot of land liberated, a lot of livelihoods restored, and the quality of life of the people in Bunyala would be highly improved. The solution does not just lie in putting up dikes and stuff. The solution lies in taking a sober look at the challenges on the ground. So I've just given that as an example of what we face when the climate goes the wrong way. But Mr. Speaker, sir, it's not too late. It's doable. It's available. And I've also found that the Department of Forest, the Kenya Forestry Service, is only too willing to partner with those who would like to help it get on the ground. I visited their offices recently. I was warmly received, and there's going to be a tour of Busia County by the Kenya Forestry Service to try and map out the forest cover in Busia and see what kind of interventions are required. And this is dire because whereas the national average is a paltry 10% forest cover, in Busia, the figures I'm seeing are very, very disheartening. We are supposed to be having a 0.4% forest cover, not even anywhere near the very small national average that we are required to have. So, Mr. Speaker, sir, I really pray that the committee, the council we are considering and whose names we intend to approve to come in and help us fix the environment, a council that contains the president, the vice president, and many senior people and experts will be able to stand up to the task and go to war against the environment change. And like any war, you don't leave it only to the soldiers. Any war demands input from the citizenry and the population. Let us mobilize our people to appreciate these things so that when NEMA comes and says, please don't, or Warma comes and says, you are plowing up to the river, the waters in the river, can you move back 6 meters? There will be no resistance on the ground. They will understand that it's for their own good that is required. So, Mr. Speaker, sir, with those few remarks, I support the motion that is on the floor, which is the report of the joint committees of these houses on nominees for appointment as members of the National Climate Change Council. Thank you, Mr. Speaker, sir.
Honorable Senator Mandago Jackson was in issue.
Mr. Speaker, I rise in support of this motion for the appointment of council members for the climate change. And Mr. Speaker, from the onset, let me say that climate change mitigation is no longer a matter that is going to be left to be discussed by non-governmental organizations, the Ministry of Environment, or specifically institutions that deal with matters climate change. This is a matter that must be canvassed in all state departments because it affects not only the future of our generations to come, but it actually affects the lifespan of the human beings. And if push comes to shove in the environment realm, the first living organs to leave this earth will be the human beings. And therefore, it is imperative that these matters of climate change are properly mainstreamed in government. Mr. Speaker, when we talk of climate change mitigation, the issues of gas emission, the issues of industrial pollution, Mr. Speaker, it is my hope and belief that this Council will take this matter very seriously, and particularly taking on the developed industrialized countries on their stake and portion of pollution. Mr. Speaker, as you are aware, most industries have been developed in the third world countries to manufacture goods and products for the West. Asia and Africa is now being blamed. We are carrying 70–80% of the blame on the pollution of the environment because we became two continents, one providing material and the other one providing an industrial hub for the West. Mr. Speaker, I hope African countries will wake up during COP meetings and demand a consumerate action and funding from the countries who have industrialized and polluted the earth more than the rest of the countries. Mr. Speaker, as we mainstream the climate change policy, both in national and county governments, Mr. Speaker, the aspect of enforcement has been lacking, and government has been reluctant for a very long time to implement laws that are in place. Mr. Speaker, it is saddening to see wetlands being destroyed, government is watching, rivers are drying, sources of water are becoming scarce, and yet there are laws that enable us to deal with this problem. Mr. Speaker, we need men and women of courage, like the late Michuki, who in a short span of less than 3 years was almost able to restore the riverbanks, the wetlands, by making sure there are no eucalyptus being planted along the rivers and in the wetlands. But what happened after Michuki left the docket? We went back to again the same problem, planting eucalyptus in wetlands, planting eucalyptus along riverbanks. Mr. Speaker, I urge the Minister of Environment to be decisive in the actions of conservation. If they are not decisive, we are going to face challenges. And we would like the national government agencies to work closely with county governments. Mr. Speaker, in my county, we have a forest called Kaptagat, which is shared between Uasin Gishu County and Elgeyo Marakwet County. Mr. Speaker, we pursued the Ministry of Environment, the Kenya Forest Service, to change and declare Kaptagat as a water tower, because Kaptagat Forest is extremely important for the growth of Eldoret Town, which is soon to become a city. Eldoret Town will not become a city without sufficient water for both domestic and industrial use. We cannot get that water if Kaptagat Forest is not conserved. And we have asked that let it be declared a water tower so that we can continuously begin planting indigenous trees, bamboo, so that we can conserve the wetlands, the sources of the rivers, and avail water. Besides water, Mr. Speaker, that forest also acts as a training ground for athletes, Mr. Speaker. And you know, with the forest being a purifier of oxygen, it gives a very conducive environment for training. We want to urge the national government to work with county governments closely in ensuring that we reforestate the forests within our counties, sharing in the burden of providing resources for that afforestation. Mr. Speaker, the role of this council also includes education, approve a national gender and intergenerational responsive public education awareness strategy and implementation program. Mr. Speaker, they say you cannot teach an old dog new tricks. If we want to become efficient in management of our environment, Mr. Speaker, we must integrate this into our education system. And Mr. Speaker, we have student organizations that can help both national and county government advance the agenda of climate change. And Mr. Speaker, I have in mind the Kenya Scouts movement, the Kenya Girl Guides movement. Mr. Speaker, if we integrate in our schools and involve the Scouts, provide funds for the Scouts and Girl Guides movement to drive this agenda, Mr. Speaker, all the children, school-going children in this country will be aware and will begin from the onset and the early stages of their life understanding the need to conserve our environment. Mr. Speaker, I would urge the national government and county governments to include Scouts movement and the Girl Guides movement in schools so that they can help us with matters of environmental management. Mr. Speaker, the biggest also threat to our rivers is urbanization and the management of solid waste. Mr. Speaker, a number of towns in this country lack proper sewerage system. And you find all the raw sewer being discharged into our rivers. Mr. Speaker, if we don't mitigate on this matter by ensuring that all major urban areas and towns, cities in this country are provided with proper sewer lines, our rivers are going to be continuously polluted. And I propose, Mr. Speaker, that even in towns and cities where we have rivers that run across, there is need for change of policy under the urban planning to ensure that all rivers become the frontage of the homes or the commercial centers, so that there is no waste being dropped in the rivers when it becomes a frontage. There is always a tendency in most of the towns in Kenya to make the rivers the back end of the compounds, and therefore it's more easy to dispose your waste through the back end of your compound because the rivers have been made the back end. I propose that even in Nairobi, with Nairobi River, if we want a sustainable way of ensuring that Nairobi River remains clean after being cleaned, because we are not going to encourage the cycle of cleaning Nairobi River 5 years, then it is left again for the next 5 years, and we have waste and garbage being dumped in the river, and then we go back to cleaning Nairobi River again after 5 years. For sustainability, Mr. Speaker, I want to propose to the county government of Nairobi to convert all properties that touch Nairobi River to make the river the frontage of those properties. And that way, we shall minimize the waste that is being put into the rivers. That will save government and generations the funds that are being used after every short period of time in creating institutions that are going to clean Nairobi River, institutions that are going to maintain Nairobi River, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, finally, as I conclude, counties are to mainstream the issues of climate change in the CIDPs. Even as counties do that, Mr. Speaker, it is imperative that through the coordination of the National Climate Council, that funds are also availed to counties to support this function. Mr. Speaker, you will be surprised that for the last 5 years, counties were being given 11 million under FLOGA funds for climate change. What is 11 million for a county like Turkana that is 66,000 square kilometers? It is a nasal area. It needs a serious intervention to make sure we change the climate situation there. We want to ask the National Treasury, development partners, to make sure that at least 60% of the activities of climate change should be domiciled in counties, because that is where the action is. And I want to acknowledge what the Senator of Nandi said about my county, Moiben sub-county. That is actually the sub-county that is letting us down in terms of forest cover. But I want to assure this House that we have a robust plan, as was in Gishu County, to make sure that we increase our forest cover to more than 15% within the next 5 years. We also want Kenya Forest Service and the Ministry of Environment to enforce the 10% forest cover requirement, whether public or private land. That way, even farmers endowed with more resources should convert part of their farmlands into forests, which can be commercial forests or indigenous forests for purposes of climate change. Mr. Speaker, I beg to support this motion and concur with my colleagues that those who have been nominated be appointed to serve in that council so that we are able to work on these matters of climate change. But I emphasize that as we attend COP conferences, African nations must wake up, and we must look the West into the eyes and squarely put the blame where it lies. There is no way America will be doing their manufacturing in China and claiming China is a leading polluter. There is no way the West will say Africa is not doing enough, while they are the ones who destroyed our natural resources, went away with all the resources, and now they want to tell us that we are responsible. Everybody must be given their fair share of the blame, and in so doing, they must give their fair share of resources for fighting climate change. Mr. Speaker, I beg to support this motion.
Thank you, Honorable Senator Mandago. Honorable members, I must appreciate the membership for the interest and the rich contributions that you have made to this particular motion. And since there are no more requests, I now call upon the mover of this motion to reply. Senator Dr. Lelengwe.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, for giving me this time to reply on this motion, a very important motion that will go a long way in changing how issues of climate change are handled in this country. Mr. Speaker, sir, we've had the effects of climate change, the impacts in our environment, the impact in our livelihoods, the impact in the general society. And I take time to appreciate, to thank every member who, for supporting this motion. I thank all members because even in their contribution, we've not had a member. It's not on record that any member has opposed the motion. Mr. Speaker, sir, I also thank the members, the Joint Committee of the Senate and of the National Assembly for taking time to vet the nominees by the President and make the recommendations as contained in our report in page 36 and stood by those recommendations. And I appreciate the members because as a committee, as a Joint Committee of Parliament, we've came up with one report. I'm aware that sometimes committees don't agree and committees come up with different reports or reports of a dissenting opinion. But in this case, we have one report and we thank the members of this joint committee. Mr. Speaker, sir, I also thank the President for nominating qualified Kenyans, Kenyans who all of us will look upon
to tackle these issues of climate change. And we look forward to them acting to make sure that this matter of climate change is prioritized and made important in our lives and in every way, the way we live as Kenyans. I also Mr. Speaker, sir, I wish the nominees the very best of luck as they embark on their duties to tackle the issue of climate change. I thank you, honorable members. I thank you, Mr. Speaker, and I beg to reply. Thank you.
Honorable members, pursuant to Standing Order 84.1, the motion does not affect the counties, and I now proceed to put the question. Honorable Senators, I put the question that the Senate adopts the report of the Joint Committee of the National Assembly Departmental Committee on Environment, Forestry, and Mining, and the Senate Standing Committee on Land, Environment, and Natural Resources on the approval hearing for the nominees for appointment as members of the National Climate Change Council laid on the table of the Senate on Tuesday, 14th March 2023, and pursuant to Section 7(4) of the Climate Change Act and Section 8 of the Public Appointments Parliamentary Approval Act, approves the nomination of Ms. Emily Mwende Waita, Mr. John Kioli, and Professor George Odera Outa for appointment as members of the National Climate Change Council, and rejects the nomination of Ms. Umra Omar. Will as many as are of that opinion say aye? Aye. Will as many as of a contrary opinion say nay? The ayes have it. Now, honorable members, you recall that earlier on we had rearranged the order paper for purposes of this particular motion, and I would want us, for purposes of good order, to resume the same so that we defer the statements and motions which are before us and deal with the motion by one Senator Kavindu. Clerk, call the next.
Order number 7, statements.
The Senator for Nandi. Senator Samson Cherargei.
Mr. Speaker, I'm not ready. I request that it be deferred up to Tuesday so that we can move to other orders. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Very well, Senator. Senator for Muranga County, Senator Joe Newton, seems to be absent in the House. We also defer that statement. Senator for Taita Taveta County, Senator Jones Maruma, he's equally not in the House, so that statement is deferred. Senator for Kajiado County, Senator Sekilengu Olekanar, he's also not in the House. That statement is deferred. Senator Mundigi. Senator Mundigi. Senator Mundigi, you have a statement? Go ahead.
Senator Mundigi, Embu County. Mr. Speaker, sir, I rise pursuant to Standing Order 53.1 to check a statement from the Standing Committee on National Security, Defense and Foreign Relations on the employment of an Assistant County Commissioner to Kiambere Division, Embu County. In the statement, the committee should 1. Explain why an Assistant County Commissioner has not been posted to Kiambere following its assessment or as a division failed Kenya Gazette Notice number 1042 of January 2022, and 2. State when the government will post an Assistant County Commissioner to the division, Senator Mundigi.
Thank you very much, Honorable Senator Mundigi. That statement is committed to the relevant committee. Senator Karungu Athangwa.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I rise on Standing Order 56, 1A, that provides that a chairperson of a committee may make a statement relating to a legislative business before the committee. Mr. Speaker, sir, pursuant to Standing Order 53-1, at the sitting of the Senate held on Thursday, 27 October 2022, Senator Alexander Mundigi, Senator for Embu, requested for a statement from the Standing Committee on Roads, Transportation and Housing regarding the adverse effect of the collapse of the Ena River Bridge in Embu County. Mr. Speaker, sir, in the statement, the committee was requested, among others, to inquire and state why the relevant government department took long to assess the safety of the Ena Bridge for use by both motor vehicles and members of the public ahead of its collapse. Explain whether the government had availed resources as a matter of urgency to construct a bridge along the Ena River to serve the people of Evurore and Muminji wards. C. State any measures the government has put in place to facilitate access to public schools, such as Kewambiti Secondary School, St. Monica Secondary School, and Kirie Secondary School, as well as hospitals like Ishiara Sub-County Hospital, that has been rendered inaccessible by the collapse of Ena Bridge. And to outline the measures the government has put in place, if any, to cushion the people of Evurore and Mumiji wards who depend on the Ena River Bridge for their livelihood, especially on sand harvesting, who depend on Ena River for their livelihood, especially on sand harvesting and access to one of the biggest livestock markets in Ishiara. Mr. Speaker, in response to the request by Senator Alexander Mundigi, MP, the committee sought and received a response to the statement from the Cabinet Secretary, Ministry of Roads and Transport. In accordance with the Standing Order 53-3B, the committee invited Senator Mundigi to appear before the committee during deliberations on the response to the statement on 28 February 2023. The Senator attended. Mr. Speaker, sir, the Ministry of Roads and Transport informed the committee that Ena Bridge collapsed on 18 October 2022, and a technical team from Kenya Rural Roads Authority, KERA, was sent on the following day, on 19 October 2022, which conducted a preliminary assessment on the cause of the collapse of the bridge and made provisions for temporary crossing. The cause of the collapse of the bridge was a result of impact after an overloaded lorry carrying sand hit the bridge. Mr. Speaker, I wish to report that a replacement bridge with modular steel was constructed across Ena River and was completed on 30th November 2022. Mr. Speaker, sir, Senator Mundigi of Embu confirmed that the bridge was indeed rehabilitated and was in operation. The committee resolved that the response was satisfactorily and thus concluded. Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker.
Thank you. The Senate Majority Leader. What's your point of order, Senator Boni Halwale?
Mr. Speaker, I just wanted to appeal to you, even if the statement is conclusive, we have some little supplementary on the same. So if you could indulge us, please.
Dr. Boni Halwale, Senator, we have a long list of items under the standing order which had been suspended. And I'm afraid that if I were to use my discretion to grant time to comment, maximum a minute, then if you must say on a supplementary bit. I believe that was also the concern by Senator Alexander Mundigi. Very well, I'll give you 1 minute and strictly 1 minute to comment on that statement. Clerk, kindly put up the timer for 1 minute.
Bwana Speaker, wakati daraja ilianguka ni mimi niliandika statement, ingawa hapo mbeleni mheshimiwa wa jimbo ndogo la Siakago alikuwa ameongea juu ya hiyo kitu, lakini watu wa Kera walienda wakaangalia na wakafanya kazi. Sisi maseneta kuna mambo mengine tunaweza kusema iwe itatuaipisha sisi maseneta tukifuatia kulingana na watu wa Kera. Mimi niliitwa na kikao ya Senate na tukaongea nao, nikawaambia hakuna haja ya kufuatilia zile barua za Kera kwa sababu unajua saa nyingine Kera inafanya kazi vile inataka kufanya. Na mimi nikaongea na hawa nikawaambia kama kungewezekana ndio iwe funzo kwa watu wa Kera waweze kwenda pale waangalie vile daraja imejengwa, kwa sababu hiyo daraja ilikuwa imejengwa miaka mingi. Na kama sasa zile magari inapitia pale haina uzito kama ile ilikuwa mbeleni, na sasa magari inakuwa siko nyingi, sasa itakuwa kazi ilifanywa na gani? Sasa mimi nilikuwa nimeomba wale watu waende waangalie tuone kama walifanya kazi ambayo kulingana vile inafaa, kwa sababu sioni vile saa hii magari inapita ni kidogo, haina uzito kama ile ilikuwa ya zamani. Ama mniambie kama nitaandika barua tena ndio sasa daraja itengenezwe kulingana na ile uzito ya kisasa.
Senator Dr. Boni Halwale.
Mr. Speaker, I just wanted to use this opportunity to appreciate the new government. Can you imagine? It's done. I want to laud the chair for this very rapid response, and more importantly, the minister, Senator Kipchumba Murkomen. This is the way we want to lead this country. I understand that this was a project of 15 million shillings, and I would like to ask the Senator of Kirinyaga to take it easy. Of Embu. Sorry, Embu. Nyoto, relax. Morango, relax. I would like to request the Senator of Embu to take it easy. Talk to the county engineer. What I'm hearing, they are talking about a bridge called Bailey's Bridge. Bailey's Bridge, to the modern naked eye, you can think that it can't take the weight. So talk to the engineer. You might find that you have a Bailey's Bridge. I have 2 Bailey's Bridge in Economani, and they have been there since 1970. They are very reliable. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Thank you. The Senate Majority Leader to issue a statement on the business of the Senate for the week commencing Tuesday, 21st March. Dr. Boni Halwale. What's your point of order, Chairman Roads Committee?
Mr. Speaker, I seek your indulgence on the Standing Order 56-1. I know it has been a tradition whereby a statement is requested by a certain member, and they read the statement as it is written without adding any other input or even the background behind that statement. But the person who requests, noting that he cannot add anything, other members are granted an opportunity to comment on that statement. It is my request and your indulgence, if you ever grant somebody to comment on a particular statement that has been raised by anyone, give that person who requested to at least reply, so that at least they can comment and say whether because yesterday we had almost the same statement, and it was discussed over here when I raised an issue of Homa Bay. And people commented, and I was not given an opportunity to reply on what was raised. Because, Mr. Speaker, when I bring an issue on this House, there is always a reason, because it is our standing orders that say the chairman must report back to the Senate on their activities. And, Mr. Speaker, when we report back to the House, we report matters of the committee which are public. If you bring something to my committee or to the committee that I chair and it is public, just know it's going to end up in this Senate, so that we tell the people what you are doing and what you are doing, and we won't allow anybody. I'm on a point of order, Honorable Murango. Just close
Senator,
Murango for a minute.
Thangwa, conclude on your point of order.
I conclude, Mr. Speaker.
Just, you note, Senator Karungu Wadhangwa, that Standing Order 56.3.1 permits the chair to allow for comments for not more than 20 minutes. I believe that and your concern is taken care of. Senate Majority Leader, read the statement.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, sir, pursuant to Standing Order number 57.1, I hereby present the business of the Senate for the week commencing Tuesday, 21st March, 2023. Mr. Speaker, sir, the status of the legislative business as of today is that there are 15 bills which are at the second reading stage. 5 of these bills, Mr. Speaker, are scheduled in today's order paper at order number 9, 10, 11, 12, and 13, with one of the bills at division stage. 7 of these bills will be scheduled in the order paper for Tuesday, 21st March 2022, while the remaining 3, which were read at first time last week, have been committed to the respective standing committees pursuant to Standing Order number 145.1. Mr. Speaker, sir, 4 other bills are at the concurrent stage pursuant to Standing Order to Article number 110.3 of the Constitution and will be scheduled for first reading upon completion of this process, while 1 other bill is scheduled for the Committee of the Whole stage and is scheduled for Tuesday, 21st March 2023. With respect to petitions, the Senate has received 9 of them so far that have been committed to the respective standing committees pursuant to Standing Order number 238.1. I urge the committees to consider these petitions expeditiously and to table reports within the required 60-day period. In the event that this is a challenge, a framework to amend the standing orders to increase the timelines is available. However, until this is done, standing committees must adhere to the 60-day period. Mr. Speaker, sir, our in-tray is ever getting larger, as evidence given above clearly shows, as well as the numerous statements sought pursuant to Standing Order number 53 and the ones issued pursuant to Standing Order number 52. Allow me, therefore, at this juncture, to express concern at the slow pace with which we are transacting business. This situation, Mr. Speaker, I find that is not sustainable. I continue to emphasize the need for respective movers to be available in the chamber whenever their bills or motions are scheduled in the order paper. This will ensure that the legislative agenda is dispensed with in a timely and seamless manner. Further, it is important that after contributing to bills or motions, honorable senators remain in the chamber for the divisions thereon. Mr. Speaker, sir, in conclusion, on Tuesday, 21st March 2023, the Senate Business Committee will consider and approve the business for the day. This will contain business that will not be concluded from today's order paper and may any other business scheduled by the Senate Business Committee. In order for the order paper of 22nd March 2022 and for Thursday, 27th, will be contain business that will not be concluded on Tuesday, 21st, and on Wednesday, 22nd, respectively. The Senate Business Committee will also schedule any other business as well as petitions and statements pursuant to these standing orders. I therefore thank you and hereby lay the statement on the table of the Senate today, the Thursday of 2022. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Next order. What's your point of order, Senator Manago?
The majority whip has laid a paper Thursday 2022. Mr. Speaker, he needs to correct that in the answer. It is 2023.
Very well. Majority Leader, take note.
Mr. Speaker. Thank you, Mr. Speaker, for that correction. May I request that the clerk treats it as a typo and makes the necessary correction. It is 2023.
Clerk, take note. Call the next order.
Order number 9, the Natural Resources Benefit Sharing Bill, Senate Bills number 6 of 2022, second reading, division.
The Honorable Danson Mukatanda is not in the House, and I also note that we have got no quorum for division. This is deferred to the next sitting. Next order.
Order number 10, the County Vocational Education and Training Bill, Senate Bills number 3 of 2022, second reading.
Similarly, the Honorable Senator Moses Kajwang, MP, who is the mover, is not in the House. This bill is also deferred to the next sitting.
Order number 11, the Agricultural and Livestock Extension Services Bill, Senate Bills number 12 of 2022, second reading.
Similarly, the Honorable Senator Maureen Tabitha Mutinda, MP, is not in the House. This is also deferred to the next sitting. Next order.
Order number 12, the Mung Bills Bill, Senate Bills number 13 of 2022, second reading.
This is also a bill by the Honorable Senator Enoch Wambua, MP, who is not in the House. This is deferred to the next sitting. Next order.
Order number 13, the Startup Bill, Senate Bills number 14 of 2022, second reading.
This is a bill sponsored by Senator Crystal Asige, MP, who is not in the House. This is also deferred to the next sitting. Next order.
Order number 14, motion, measures to curb the doping menace, which is threatening Kenya's impeccable global reputation in athletics.
Honorable Senator Cherargei, this is your motion that ought to resume debate.
Mr. Speaker, I request that you defer until next week because the CS of sports is briefed. Thank you, Speaker.
That is noted. The motion is deferred to the next sitting. Clerk, next order.
Order number 15, provision of free sanitary towels to end period poverty.
This is also a motion that ought to have come for resumption. Senator Gloria Orwoba, who is the mover, is not in the House. It is therefore deferred to the next sitting. Call the next order.
Order number 16, motion, institution of measures to curb incessant high electricity costs in Kenya.
This is a motion sponsored by Senator Mohamed Tute, MP, who is not in the House now. This motion is therefore deferred to the next sitting. Call the next order.
Order number 17, motion, enhancing highway safety and convenience.
This motion was sponsored by Senator Wahome Wamatinga, MP, who is not in the House. This motion is therefore deferred to the next sitting. Next order, Clerk.
Order number 18, motion, compensation to Kenya victims of the 1998 bombing of the United States Embassy in Nairobi.
What's your point of order, Majority Leader?
Mr. Speaker, I have seen and heard you postpone quite a number of items on the order paper. And Mr. Speaker, as your loyal whip, I can confirm that these members were around this afternoon and that they were therefore aware that their business was on the order paper. I want to request that the chair now puts on hindsight a warning to these members.
This is an issue, remember, Majority Whip, that came before the Senate Business Committee. And we discussed in extenso the consequences of members allowing their motions and their statements to be put in the order paper when they know very well they will not be present. And as a matter of fact, our position was taken that where you have your motion in the order paper, it is expected of you to be present. In the event that you are not, then consequences befall. I take note of your concern. Equally, the chair takes note of the concern for deferment. Senator Agnes Kavindu Mudama, you may now move your motion.
Thank you, Chair, for this opportunity. Sorry, Mr. Speaker, I beg to move the motion in changed version, and I will change the figure 213 to 223, and the figure 12 to 44. Motion on compensation to the Kenyans, Kenyan victims of the 1998 bombing of the United States Embassy in Nairobi, that are aware that disaster is defined as an overwhelming event, circumstances that tests the adoption of responses and community individuals beyond their capability, and leads momentarily to massive disruption of functions for a community and individuals that often exceed their capability to cope with existing resources. Further aware that such was the case with the 1998 US Embassy bomb disaster in Nairobi, in which many of Kenyans' casualties resulted from the collapse of adjacent building located within 2 or 3 blocks radius, and with reverberation being felt in most parts of Nairobi that resulted to 223 Kenyans and 44 Americans killed and over 5,000 citizens of both countries being seriously injured. Noting that US allies, including Kenyans, have endured the great burden of death and long-term and in many instances permanent physical and psychological injury. Further noting that the United States government has since compensated some of the victims and families of the US citizens, leaving the families of Kenyan citizens uncertain that victims uncompensated. Now, therefore, the Senate resolves that the Ministry of Foreign Affairs advance relationship, friendship, and compensation between the United States and Kenya by supporting the eligibility of Kenyans and American victims and their personal representatives, surviving spouses, and next of kin in the Victim Compensation Fund pursuant to the Justice for United States victim to sponsor terrorist acts, and 1, two, partner with the Ministry of Health to explore subsidized medical treatment for the surviving victims of the bomb blasts. Chair, Mr. Speaker, noting that Americans have funds the U.S. Victim State-Sponsored Terrorist Fund, and given that, Mr. Speaker, Kenyans and even Tanzanians suffered a battle that did not belong to them because the Al-Qaeda group had targeted the American embassy and not Kenya. Kenyans suffered in a battle that was not theirs. And so over 5,000 were injured. 223 people died, Kenyans, and Americans 44. And at least 300 were either permanently blinded or suffered severe vision loss. Over 1,000 suffered eye injuries. Some were totally blinded, namely a few of them. That is 1, Catherine Bwere, Douglas Asiolo, and 3, 1, Stanley Mutuma, among others. Right now, as we speak, Mr. Speaker, we have 1 Mr. Meshak Nyakundi who has throat cancer and right now is looking for funds to replace his voice box because it has been removed. He's struggling, he has no funds, he has nobody to help, and that is why we are fighting and requesting the Americans to involve Kenyans in this fund, because they suffered a battle that did not belong to them. And on humanitarian grounds, they should remember these people who are still suffering up to today. In August 7th, this year, will be 25 years of these Kenyans suffering, waiting for justice, which they have not received. Many divorces and many families' disputes were caused by this bombing. Many people were still going through treatment, which they cannot afford and have died since. Mr. Speaker, I ask Halwale to second.
Senator Mudhama and honorable members, it's now 6:30, and Senator, for your comfort, you still have got 13 minutes in the next sitting to continue moving your motion. You've only utilized 7 minutes, you still have got your 13 minutes. Honorable members, it is now 6:30 p.m., time to adjourn the House. The Senate therefore stands adjourned until tomorrow, Tuesday, 21st of March, 2023 at 2:30 p.m.